In 2002, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan famously used the phrase illegal occupation to describe Israel's annexation of the West Bank in 1967. But Annan's critics were quick to point out his use of the word illegal was incorrect, since the West Bank never legally belonged to Palestinian Arabs in the first place.
In 2002, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan famously used the phrase illegal occupation to describe Israel's annexation of the West Bank in 1967. But Annan's critics were quick to point out his use of the word illegal was incorrect because the West Bank never legally belonged to Palestinian Arabs in the first place.
Palestine was ruled by the Ottoman Turks from 1516 to 1918. Then for the next 30 years, it was controlled by the British, until Israel declared its independence. During the war that followed, the Kingdom of Jordan invaded the West Bank and formally annexed the land in 1950.
There is a lack of historical understanding, and also there is an abuse here by this saying of international law. Since the West Bank, Iudeea and Samaria, was annexed by Jordan, it was a Jordanian territory. And in 1967, the 6 Days War, when Israel had, again, a campaign of self-defense, when 3 armies of Syria, Jordan, and Egypt were surrounding us, ready to drive us into the sea, Israel won the war, and as a result, we took into possession the West Bank, Iudeea and Samaria. This land was captured from Jordan.
Since Israel recaptured the land from Jordan, it now belongs to Israel, according to international law. One judge on the International Court of Justice wrote the following about the 1967 war. A state acting in lawful exercise of its right of self-defense may seize and occupy foreign territory, as long as such seizure and occupation are necessary to its self-defense. And where the prior holder of territory had seized that territory unlawfully, the state which subsequently takes that territory in the lawful exercise of self-defense has against that prior holder better title.
We bought our land in the blood of our soldiers. We didn't start with a war. The Arabs started with a war. All over the world, the idea when someone started with a war and he failed, he paid the price. He paid the price. So why we have to pay the price now?
The last claim the Jewish people make for the land of Israel focuses not on how they got it, but what they did with it.
Today, Israel's population is well over 8 million. But in 1850, only 350,000 people lived in Israel and the West Bank. In 1857, the British consul in Palestine reported that the area was empty of inhabitants, and that its greatest need is a body of population. A decade later, British scientist H.B. Tristram wrote that whole villages there are rapidly disappearing from the face of the earth. And American writer Mark Twain wrote this about the Jezreel Valley. There is not a solitary village for 30 miles in either direction. There are 2 or 3 small clusters of Bedouin tents, but not a single permanent habitation.
Today, many Palestinian Arabs claim that the Jews stole Arab land, evicted the owners, and left thousands of Arab farmers homeless. But is that the real story? Let's take a look.
As early as the 1850s, Jewish people started buying land in Palestine, but their choices were limited by Arab sellers.
The Arabs settled mainly in mountainous areas, and they did not offer those lands for sale. The Arabs wanted to sell land in places where they did not live, in places which they had left in the past.
Records show that most of the land purchased by the Jews belonged to a small group of wealthy Muslim families. most of whom didn't even live in Palestine.
The Arabs were from many walks of life. Effendis who lived in Beirut and in Damascus, as well as locals. Also people who lived in the rural villages. All of them were willing to sell their land. There was always more land available than the demand for them.
From the beginning, the Jewish policy was clear. No Arabs were to be removed from their land against their will. In 1920, Zionist labor leader David Ben-Gurion announced that under no circumstances must we touch land belonging to fellaheen or work by them. Only if a fellah leaves his place of settlement should we offer to buy his land at an appropriate price.
The Jewish National Fund bought the lands legally in order to fully secure the ownership of these lands. The Arabs were not evicted from the lands. They received compensation and the full process for the lands.
That compensation was documented by the British Peel Commission in 1937. The group had been sent to Palestine to investigate clashes between Arabs and Jews. Their report shows that of the 664 Arab workers dispossessed by land sales, 347 were resettled by the British government for free. The rest refused help and found employment elsewhere. Not only did the Jews buy the land legally, they also paid 10 times the normal rate. In 1944, the going rate for rich, fertile soil in Iowa was $110 an acre, while in Palestine, Jews were paying more than $1,000 an acre for arid, rocky land.
They say they are crazy. They buy this land. It's dirty land. It's no good land. But they are not stupid, and they know that we must work very hard, and they work very hard. Look what we have. We are only 66 years old, and look what we have already.